What's going on everyone? This is Gaurav and welcome to my learning channel. So this video is the start of a playlist where we will learn about how to ace through a data analyst interview. Now this playlist is especially designed for the people who are starting up as a data analyst with about 0 to 5 to 6 years of experience. Now this does not mean that you have all in all everything combined together 0 to 5 to 6 years of experience, but rather what I mean is like you have to 0 to 5 to 6 years of experience as a data analyst itself. Alright, so in this video we'll talk about the overall structure of the data analyst interview, and then in the subsequent video we'll go into the details of each of the individual topics etc that I'm going to discuss today, and as well as the subsequent video is as per my own experience and the research. So if you feel that I have missed out on anything, please do add it in the comment section. One last pointer before we get started is that data analyst is a very much of an umbrella term these days. It is kind of used fairly loosely in a wide variety of contexts in different industries. So I'll give you a few examples. Like say for instance, marketing analytics team would call their employees as a data analyst, and their day-to-day would revolve around designing A/B testing, doing measurements, finding the statistical significance, etc. While on the other hand, the risk team would also call their team members as a data analyst, and their day-to-day would revolve around finding out the very high risk and low probability events and how to do the risk mitigation if one of those events actually happens in the real world. So while there are commonalities in the skill set which is required for these roles, there are definitely a lot of nuances as well. And these gaps of the skill set which is required between these roles sort of keeps on increasing as you move further and mature into a particular role. So for today's conversation, I'll give you a structure which should prepare you for the most of the data analyst role. However, there could be some curveballs in some of the roles as well. So my recommendation is going to be that use these videos that I'm preparing as a baseline, but at the same time, before the start of the interview, definitely talk to the interviewers or your HR team and make sure that the structure and that your understanding of the interview is exactly the same as what it's going to be in the actual interview settings. All right, so coming to the topic. On an average, you can expect about 3 to 5 rounds of interview for any of the data analyst position. And I would say that your skew is probably going to be more around like 3 rounds as compared to the 5, maybe 6 rounds. Now, of course, there are some outliers where you might need to go through a few of the extra rounds. And now, typically, whenever this happens, one of the two things might be happening. One is maybe your interviews haven't gone in a very concrete way. So your interviewer does not feel very confident in saying yes or no. So that's why he or she might actually want to take a few more rounds just to make sure that their decision is correct. Or it's also possible that maybe based on your skill set, they feel like that you're probably more suited for one of the another position that they might have in your team. And that's one of the reasons why they actually might want you to meet with the another set of interviewers who is probably interviewing for the open position in their team. Now, be as it may, it doesn't really matter. Even if you have to go through a few of the additional rounds, it's totally fine. If you're prepared, it doesn't really matter whether it's going to be 3 rounds, 4 rounds, or 5 rounds. Now, in terms of the structure, typically first round is going to be your technical round. Here you could expect that coding questions. Now, usually you would be expected to have a solid or good understanding of SQL and or Python. Now, some organizations also ask SAS-based questions. Now, in case what you're wondering what is SAS, this is not SaaS, but rather this is a SAS. Definitely Google about it if you don't know what a SAS is. But there are about I would say 30 to 40% of organization in the BFSI industry, which is your banking and financial sectors and insurance, who still use SAS. This is a little bit of an older technology that was being used by organizations about 10 odd years ago for statistical analysis. It's a very powerful tool. So I'm not saying that it's completely outdated, but rather it's something that was very much prevalent about 5, maybe 10 years ago. At this point in time, most of the organization have moved towards more of a SQL and Python combination as compared to using something like SAS. However, with that said, this is something that you should definitely clarify with your interviewers or your HR team, that which language am I supposed to or am I allowed to use in the interview settings. Personally, for me, when I conduct an interview, I let the candidate choose between SQL and Python. And the reason behind is that we have SQL and Python both available in our tech stack, and the data available can be accessed both via SQL as well as Python. Now, in terms of how your overall experience is going to be, for the most part, you can expect, and I would say that this is about 80 to 85% of the time, you could potentially expect that there's going to be some portal. On the left hand side, it's possible that you will have all the questions, the details written. And on the right hand side, you will have a blank space, which is more of an IDE of sorts. And then you can choose one of the coding language from the top down. And for the most part, it's probably going to be SQL or Python. And then afterwards, you will take a look at the question. The data will be inbuilt. And then you can go ahead and write the question on the right hand side and you can execute the code. If your code execution is successful, then you will move on to the next question, and then afterwards, the story continues. On an average, you could potentially expect that you will have to solve about 5 to maybe 10 questions depending upon the level of difficulties, and overall time allocated would be somewhere in the range of 30 minutes to 1 hour. Personally, working in this industry for last 15 years, I have seen so many good candidates fumble due to nervousness of interview that I have stopped using third-party solution altogether. I practically ask the interviewer to open a notepad or IDE of their choice and write the code and give people partial mark even if there is a minor syntax error. It's not absolutely the end of the world for me. And I'll tell you the reason why. Think of it like this: in the real life, if you are working in any organization, you can always open google.com and you can go and take a look at the syntax. However, what really takes a lot of time is just that logic building and ensuring that the course that you're writing has a good space and a time complexity. So that's one of the things where I don't really want to compromise. However, this is something which is very much subjective on the interviewer and also which company that you are interviewing for. So this is one of the things that you should clarify perhaps before the interview. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that you could potentially expect 5 to 10 different questions. Usually, the first question is going to be the easiest, and as you keep on solving these questions, the level of difficulty will keep on increasing. Now, typically, I have seen that this round is an elimination round. So if you're not able to solve above a certain number of questions, then you will be eliminated and your entire interview process will stop. So definitely, this is going to be a little bit stressful, but at the same time, with the right amount of practice, you can crack such interview very easily. Now I'm going to take a quick pause here as I have a kind request. If you like a content like this and would like for me to keep on making similar content even in the future, then please do like and subscribe. Your gesture is all I need to keep on pushing out more such content. Now once you clear the first round, then you could expect another 2 to 3 rounds where things are going to be mixed and matched. Now here are some of the common type of questions that you could potentially expect. The first type of question is case study. Now as a part of a case study, the interviewer usually wants to gauge your problem solving skills, your structured thinking, and of course your communication. A sample problem for this genre of question could be that a company has hired you as a consultant and they would like to invest in a social media marketing. However, ever since they have taken this decision, their overall acquisition has been going down, which is fairly counterintuitive. So could you help them understand why? Now there is a very set way of solving a problem like this. So do check out the video that I'm making for case study. Now, one thing for sure is that you should not straight up jump into the solution mode where you will start giving the recommendation that you should do X, Y, Z, because that's not the core intent of this question. The core intent is that first and foremost, you should ask the right set of questions, and then afterwards, you should make a structure and you should be very vocal about what that structure is. And then from based off of that structure, you should tell what the solution is going to be. The final conclusion why their sales are going down or what percentage is it going down, it really doesn't matter. If there is any kind of a numericals involved, the final answer, the final number probably does not hold as much water as compared to the overall structure and overall communication bit of it. So definitely focus a lot more on your communication, focus a lot more on your structure as compared to the final answers. The second type of question that you could potentially expect is a guess estimate or a puzzle. As a part of a guess estimate, you would be gauged on your familiarity and comfort level with numbers. Now, this does not mean that you need to have like a very solid understanding of mathematics or the linear algebra or the trigonometry or things like this. This simply means that how comfortable are you with the complex structure of the mathematical calculation. So I'll give you a sample example. How many tennis balls can you fit into an aeroplane? Once again, there is a very specific way to solve a problem like this. So definitely check out the video that I'm making on this particular topic. But at a very high level, the structure is going to be very important. One of the potential solution is going to be, you can first of all clarify that, hey, if I have to fit all the tennis balls in a particular airplane, can I just focus on the middle section of the airplane? I think it is called fuselage. And if so, then afterwards the calculation becomes fairly simple because now you know that in an airplane, typically about 250 to 300 people sits. You know the typical height of any person, and based off of which you can determine the overall volume of a plane. Once you know the overall volume of the plane, you also know the overall volume of a tennis ball. You just simply divide it, and there you go. You have the number of balls that you can fit in an airplane. But while you are doing this calculation, you have to be very vocal. All the different assumptions that we are making and what type of structure that we are following is what really matters. Once you keep on explaining all of these things to your interviewer, that's exactly what they are looking for. Next topic is your resume based question. This really depends upon all the details that you have in your resume. So a few of the question could be, could you explain what did you do as a part of a particular project? Or you mentioned that you know PySpark, how would you rate yourself on the scale of 1 to 10? One of the very important thing, and this is something that I keep on telling in all of my videos, is that do not lie on your resume. Just stick to your guns, just stick to your strength. It's really important that you should not exaggerate on all the work that you have done, because what ends up happening is that for any of the resume based question, if the interviewer finds out that your understanding of a particular project is not very strong, that essentially just puts a question mark on all of the project that you might have done. So it's really important that you are very crisp and crystal clear on the details that you're providing in the resume, and you should be able to defend each and every line of it. Next one is a scenario based question. Now, these are the type of question that typically starts with a simple case study and ends up in a small coding exercise. I'll give you a simple example. Let's just say that you are a head of a risk for a bank and you see that the overall fraud losses or the risk based losses are going up. Now you have been given a data set with the transaction level information, which will have information like amount or the name of the merchant where the transaction happened, the industry and which transaction is a fraud, etc. So can you come up with a strategy that will help you identify the high risk segment? Can you think of all of those factors that's going to impact? As a part of this problem, they do not expect you to know how actually fraud happens, but rather they just want you to know, can you do an exploratory data analysis? Can you do a simple segmentation in the interview setting? Now, as long as you're able to do that, you're all set. You don't have to worry about anything else. Now, next type of questions could be your HR questions. By HR, I mean human resources. Now, I call all of these questions as a human resource questions. Now, quite honestly, they could be asked by your interviewing panel, which could be your hiring manager or their colleagues. And some of the questions that you could expect as a part of this particular genre of question is that why do you want to come here? What are your goals in the next 3 to 5 years? Or can you tell me something more about yourself? You see, there is two different things that is being achieved as a part of these type of questions. One is that they are very good icebreakers. Some of these questions is potentially going to be asked right in the beginning of interview. Sometime the interviewer just want to make sure that if you are a little bit nervous, you can just take that all that nervous energy out as a part of these questions. And second one is that we also want to make sure that you are very clear about your goals, or you are very clear about why you actually want to come to this particular organization. Because if you're clear about why you're getting into an organization, then the chances that you're going to regret that decision later on is kind of fairly low. So you could potentially be a high performer if you're very much clear about what's coming your way right on the day one itself. So I would suggest, in order to prepare for a question like this, you should write down the question, you should write down your response, and then try to practice a little bit so that you don't have to think on the spot in the interview settings. Now, one thing I want to clarify, that once you clear the first round, the rest of the rounds are not elimination round. Typically, everyone gets to be a part of all of these rounds. So once your interview is complete, hiring manager collates everyone's feedback and take a decision whether or not they want to move ahead with your candidature. You could expect one more round after this. This is usually with your skip level leader or your double skip level leader. If you have reached this round, that it usually means that you have cleared all the interviews for the most part, and this is simply just a meet and greet formality. However, just be ready, because these senior leaders could also potentially ask some interview-like questions. Now, in terms of the overall timeline, it really depends upon how bad the company wants to fill that position. If they are really in a rush, then you could expect the entire process to be finished within a week. I have even seen that all of these rounds of interview to be finished in like literally 2 days. Else, you could potentially expect that the entire process will take about 2 to 3 weeks. Now, in coming videos, we will dive into each of the interview topics, and I will share some of the sample questions and how to answer them. Until then, I wish you best of the luck in your learning journey. Thank you so much.